Hi Mark, welcome to the very first Entrepreneurs in Conversation for this year anyway. Look, before we begin, or just before we sort of start talking a little about the journey that you've been on, it'd be great to sort of understand a little bit about what you do and what your actual innovation has ended up being from where you perhaps started the journey of bringing wire by click to market.
Yep, so I guess as a bit of a snapshot, what we've got is a modular wiring solution. So the crux of our solution is all about saving time and more efficiency in the construction industry. So it's essentially a plug and play type arrangement, which is used by electrical contractors on mainly at this stage large commercial projects. Mm-hmm. But obviously with the opportunity then to push into residential and high density residential is our target. But essentially as I said before, it's a plug and play solution that saves time and consequently money on site for electrical contractors.
So how, just to bring us on that journey, how did you decide, or why did you think this was going to be an innovation that actually might benefit people or actually have some benefit to electrical contractors?
So for me, I'm actually an electrical contractor myself by trade, electrician, and I had an electrical contracting company and saw the opportunity. There's a lot of products that are coming out of Europe, which are similar, in the similar vein of ours, which is a modular solution, but they seem to be over-engineered and had a lot of aspects to their design that weren't necessarily needed to achieve what they were trying to set out to achieve. So hence they were overpriced. So I saw an opportunity there, and that's where the idea spawned. And then from that we started to investigate different avenues and look at different opportunities. And then it sort of we started going down a particular path and a particular design, and as happens so often in these sort of situations, that twisted and turned a lot of times, and we ended up with the product that we've got today.
Do you remember when we first met?
Yep.
I don't think I understood it. I don't think I got
I'm not 100% sure you still understand
No,
that.
I still don't understand it. And I describe it badly every time. But electricians essentially do terminations, right? So
yes.
They wire something,
Yep.
and then here's where my technical knowledge, you love this when I explain it like this. You get a wire, you basically terminate somewhere, or you make a join, simply, and you go down to a power point, or you go to a light fitting, whatever it might be. In simple terms, your solution is that you eliminate that step. You've got one wire that essentially runs down the house and you sort of plug things in, essentially. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think the key is, if you look in a room like this where you've got fluoros throughout, commercial is where we have our strongest market share at the moment. Yeah. And it's basically because it's uniform layouts. But essentially what we do is we have pre-made leads that have male and female plugs on them, which allow the electrician to simply click them together, which replaces the termination. So traditionally, and still a lot of people would hardwire that, where they're literally stripping wires, twisting them together, putting an outlet on there, terminating it. And the byproduct of our product, of something like ours, like a soft wiring solution, and why it's gaining so much momentum in the market, is not only because of the efficiency it delivers in its own right, it's the byproduct. It's already been tested and certified in a factory environment, so there's no faults on site. The ability to restructure it so you can reuse it, pull it apart and change the layout without having to replace the material. So there's that environmental benefit as well. But essentially, you're 100% right. It's replacing the termination with a pre-made connection. Yeah.
So that's the spiel,
yep.
Right? So that's the spiel you give everyone when you go out to sell it to someone in terms of a marketplace. Tell me about the journey. Tell me about the very first time you had the idea. I reckon you would have been at Sage Automation.
No, I had the electrical contracting company when I first had the idea.
Did you? And then you went to Sage?
Yep, then I was at Sage Automation for 5 years.
Right.
5 years, nearly 6 years. But I think probably just going on the spiel for me, I'm not great at the spiel because I'm not great at pre-can, but that is essentially what we do. Yeah. But where it all started was I was doing a lot of shop fitting work, and particularly I think where the idea first came to me was we were doing a lot of when I had the contracting business for Rebel Sports, a lot of their new stores when they started to gain some momentum in the market over here. And I sort of thought there had to be a better way of doing it, and started to look around and see what there was in the market. And then I thought there was a real opportunity, and the very first time that I actually put pen to paper was literally on my desk at work, big A3 scrapbook, started penciling out some ideas of what I thought potentially might work in the market and some ideas. And I look back at those now and it's almost embarrassing. Some of the sketches are pretty average. I'm still not a great drawer, but the original idea is just so far from where we are now. It's amazing.
Was it more fun then or now?
Depends what way you look at it. I think essentially it was more what I thought how it was going to all go down back then was probably more fun. It's easy to be romanticised by, I don't know, by the word entrepreneur or whatever you'd like to call the process. It's easy to be romanticised by it. There's a lot of great stories out there of successful people, and I think I was quite young when I first did it, and I think I was romanticised by it and thought that the outcome would be a lot sooner and be a lot more... I would probably get a result a lot sooner, but also the prize would be a lot bigger, I guess.
So almost at that time, it's sort of at that early idea stage, and I want to drill into this a little bit more because I think this is what I guess we're really looking to see, the real story behind some of those things. As I say, you get the spiel, which is all very interesting, and it's great. It's a terrific story, but there's some pretty hard times in amongst there, and from what the journey started to where it ends in two different places generally. I'm curious about kind of those early days, still going back there just for a second, and then I'll jump into asking you to comment on some things. But in those early days, you know, was it more fun to have conversations around the dinner table about it and think it was a great idea and that this could be a world-beating thing or whatever it might be?
Absolutely.
Than actually walking out on the street and doing something about it? And I guess the second part of that question is, what did you do when you walked out on the street to do something about it?
I think the key to the answer to that question is, when you're talking around the dinner table, before you've actually invested any emotion or any money, it's a really good conversation to have, because you're talking about blue sky, you're talking about the what ifs, and there's no real emotional attachment at that point. It's more of a belief. And I think as you go through the process, you're brought down to earth pretty quickly, especially once you start investing a lot of money. When you start investing a lot of money into anything, it starts to change the pressures, it changes the whole environment. I mean, and you say about having tough days, we've had a lot of tough days on the way through. Resilience is, if you don't have resilience in this industry, you're not, in what we're doing, and certainly anyone looking at something like that, you won't survive. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that's probably been the hardest challenge, is just dusting yourself off, getting back up, changing what you're doing, looking at other options, making it work, and starting again. So many times through the process, I feel like I've started again, where you've almost got to a point and you think you're almost there, and you get knocked back down, you think, okay, start again, and it gets easier, and it gets harder, because now we're a sizable business in our industry, and we've got a fair bit of market share, but the amount of cash flow you need to do things, the amount of decisions you make, there's a lot more that hinges on a single decision, rather than when you're sitting around that kitchen table, yeah, and you're really impressing people by your great idea, but you don't really know what's involved to actually get it to where it needs to go, and the type of money that it takes. So hopefully that answers it in some way. Yeah.
So what did you do first? I'm going to come back to that a bit, because yep. I do know, obviously having been associated with your business for some time, or watched it for some time at least, there have been some pretty dark days, and you know, even today, not that it's bad, but even today there are days when I'm sure you go to work and still wonder, where's this going to head, or is this going to be okay still, or whatever it might be. But let's go back to when you started and just drill on that a little bit in yep. terms of, what did you do first? You had this idea. Yep. What was your first step back then? And I think you sold your speedboat.
I did sell my speedboat, but that was actually to get married. Probably the first thing I did was, and possibly one of the biggest mistakes I made, was go and talk to a patent attorney. And no disrespect to patent attorneys, they certainly have their place. But I didn't understand the process. I reckon it was probably a mistake on my behalf. I should have got to understand the process better. I thought I did. And I think that's the crux of a lot of things when you're starting out. You think you know a lot that you don't potentially know. Yep. And we went and talked to a patent attorney, and of course we got patents in place. And this was before we really had a defined product. Luckily our patents were quite loose, were as loose as they possibly could be, so that it covered a lot of things within our core idea, mm-hmm. and they're still relevant today. But the problem is, we invested a lot of money early in patents for a product we didn't even have. And we pay a lot of IP, and we changed our strategy along the way, and now we focus on a bigger stable of IP, and not necessarily hinged on one thing. But I think that was the first thing I did, and then from there started talking to people. And I think we started doing some prototypes and some bits and pieces, and got some really good response. And I think a lot of people in the industry were, and some key people we spoke to, and I think come and saw yourself and had a chat to you when you were at TCG. And I think a lot of people were pretty impressed by the direction we were going. They liked the product, but I don't necessarily, it was think it was a product that they were sold on. They were more invested in where we were taking the market and what we were trying to achieve. And then the process was just going through, trying to find. Initially, I think we developed a product for a market, which we had the product which we thought was a great idea. And very quickly I learned that you need to let the market dictate what the great idea or the great product is. So we went out to the market and did some focus groups, and we found out that the product that we had designed was actually a really good idea, but it just wasn't going to work. It just wasn't feasible. We're starting to get into that area of being over-engineered, and we had some engineers and some design guys then involved. And I learnt quickly about managing a team as well through that process, because engineers love to create something that is going to be the best of the best of the best. And unfortunately, that's usually the most expensive of the most expensive. But I think we sort of went down that path, and eventually we got to, through those focus groups, we developed a really good product, and we'd brought it right back. And it sounds silly, and I still say it today, it actually costs more money to create a simple idea than it does to create a complex one. You can find, I could go out and find a handful of people to create a complex product version of our product tomorrow. To find someone that can boil it right back to the necessities and get the price point right is difficult. And that's, once we got to that point, we knew we had the winning product, and hence we started getting some grounds in commercialising it and got some other shareholders involved and got it to where it is today.
So when it failed, let's say, you went out
Yep.
to market almost and it failed,
Yep.
was that one of those low points?
It was, and I reckon there's probably half a dozen points throughout the process that you sort of question whether it's time to reevaluate whether you keep going. And then if the resilience kicks in and the determination and all those sort of things. But I think for us, yeah, that was certainly one of the low points. And it was a hard decision to make because we'd invested a lot in those prototypes early days to get it to a point where it was. It was a very tough thing for me to actually admit that we got it wrong, personally. And it was an even tougher thing to go back to people that were involved and say, look, we're now going to develop it this way. And of course, you probably damaged my credibility a little bit, but I guess everyone sort of thinks, well, hang on, what's going on? Why? Yeah. And although if we hadn't, we never would have got where we are today, but it's still a very tough decision to make.
Well, why didn't you let go?
I think I'm just stubborn. Or potentially silly, I'm not sure. But I think just that, I think again, as in the early days, we knew we were heading in the right direction, we just didn't have the right product. Mm-hmm. And I think in that particular situation, I knew that we had the right product, so it sort of made it easier to keep going.
So one of the themes that we often see with entrepreneurs is the idea or the concept that you're on a team, yep. but not everyone's on the same team as you, mm-hmm. even though you think they are. Yep. So I guess that's a little bit of how you had with the engineers and people that you thought on your team, yep. as well as your patent attorney and all the rest of it. But they often always aren't on your team. I guess you would have bumped into consultants and a whole lot of other people that would have had expert advice and trying to sell you their wares along the way. Mm-hmm. How did they impact on the business in terms of this team? Is it the team of one that drives this, or is it the team of a few?
That is a really tough question. And I think my opinion on consultants and experts is probably not a great one. I think it can be a distraction in a lot of ways. I think in anything you do in life, I think the best and what has been the most powerful for us and the key to our success so far and will be the key to us moving forward is finding people that have done it, people that actually know what they're talking about. You can read a lot of things in textbooks, it doesn't make you an expert. If you can, what I've gained from, I've got three or four really key mentors and probably another half a dozen outside of that of people that have done similar things, completely different industries, completely different walks of life. But the value I get from a cup of coffee and a 5-minute conversation from them, a consultant couldn't teach me in a year. And I think they're the sort of people that when things don't go right, they've been there, they know how to turn them around, they know how hard it is to turn them around, rather than something that they've read or that somebody else has done. It's a completely different mentality. Mm-hmm. It's a completely different mentality. And probably, I think, in my personal experience with the consultants, I think mentors know how to relay the information better as well. People that have been there and done it know how much it hurts, and know how to influence your direction forward by telling a story. And it might be just the way that I learn as well. By hearing somebody else's experience, I learn a lot more than hearing what I should do, or I keep referring to textbook, but what in theory what should work. because businesses are all different. But I think for me, I think they can become a distraction. I think patent attorneys, I think all of those guys, and they're certainly they mean well, and I think they have a place. But I think having somebody that's been through it and talking to somebody that's been through it gives you a lot more clarity. You've got to be very careful not to be distracted, and certainly from a time sense, but also from a financial sense, because usually most people starting out in this area cash flow is tight, don't have a lot of cash, don't have a lot of capital to make it happen. And if you go out and spend $50,000 on a consultant or $100,000 on a patent, you might find that $150,000 could have got you a product to market, and by far the best barrier for a competitor is having a product in the market. A patent is only any good if you've got a product to protect. The best protection against a competitor is get something in the market and get it there quick and do it well and get substantial market share.
So when you've fallen on a heap,
Yep.
and it sounds like almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of have to make mistakes to fall on a heap. You've actually got to be in a position where those things don't work out. It's not a perfect world.
Yep.
You then you reach down to your mentors or people that try and pick you back up and make sense of the mess, if you like, that's there. How does your family cope with that? How do you go home at night and think, well, you're dragging a whole family through this?
Yep.
What happens there?
Well, I think I'm not so sure it's the family. It certainly does affect your family. I'm married. I've got 2 young children. When you mentioned earlier at Sage, I actually left my job at Sage to pursue this full time when my wife was 6 months pregnant. So that's a pretty tough call. And she was pretty supportive once she knew. And I'm incredibly lucky. I've got a very supportive partner and family unit, which have always been pretty supportive. Well, my immediate family, some of my extended family, not so much. They're always, the risk of doing something like this, investing money in something like this, it's not a traditional way of setting your family up. But I think it's more hard for yourself to be able to look at your family knowing that you've got a lot on the line, and you almost feel a bit selfish sometimes. You almost feel like I've made this decision to go down this path where somebody, at this very point in time, so we've been doing this for 5 years, at this very point in time, if I pursued my career and stayed on wages, I would have made more money today. Which is hard. It's hard to look at your family. We're looking at moving at the moment, and the house we could have bought is not the house we're going to buy. But it's all, I guess we're all caught up on the dream that one day we're going to be able to buy exactly what we want. So but I think it's probably harder for the individual. I think the family, if you've got a good family unit, they're always going to be pretty supportive. But I think where I find it hard, even still today, if I have a tough day, to be able to go home and look at your family and realise that you've made decisions that influence all of their life, and sometimes it makes me feel a little bit selfish. I know my motivations are to give us all a better opportunity, but yeah, it is tough, especially on tough days.
Would you do it again?
I've been asked that question a lot of times, and I reckon I answer it differently depending on what day it is. If I knew what I knew now, back when I was doing the drawing on the A3 piece of paper, probably not. But if I had the opportunity again after this to do it again, yeah, I would.
Do you remember what we first met when I saw the product in probably its raw state prior to the first failure almost? Do you remember what?
Pretty sure you tried to set up the first failure.
Do you remember what I said about it? Do you remember what that conversation was about?
No, I don't, to be honest. I remember the first thing I remember when we met is when we met with a industry champion who knew the industry. And I think it was probably the sharpest learning curve for me, and it was one that I had to have. We basically went into this meeting and we sat down, and he, a very highly regarded person, and I remember you and I sitting across the table from this guy, and you basically said to him, I just wanted to show you this product and see if you think it had legs, because I'm not sure. And that's when I sort of sat there and thought, holy cow, maybe this isn't a great idea. It really that was a point where reality hit. And luckily he said, yeah, I think it's got legs and I think we can move forward, and we moved forward from there. But I think, the first conversation, that's pretty much all I remember, because it scared the bejeebers out of me.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because that you have experts in the field, but the real expert is the market, right? So taking
Absolutely.
it to someone else that says, well, will this work? And I think that guy was from memory, he was the guy that controlled Clipsel's product at the time.
Yeah, he was. He was a manufacturing manager at Clipsel.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to hit you with a couple of quotes, and I want to hear what you thought about, what you think about them. And I picked these out particularly for you because I kind of know your history a little bit. But Thomas M. Edison sort of said, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think nowadays the appeal is the multimedia space, the digital media. Everybody's looking at that space. And there's a lot of space in, I mean, what we're doing, our product isn't sexy. It's not a great industry. It's a construction industry which is probably at the lowest point it's been in the last 20 years. It's tough. But in tough markets, there's opportunity that never ever existed previously. Like our competitors, the Clipsals, the HPMs, the big companies of the world, the first thing they do when things get tough is they get rid of their R&D team. So they're doing no R&D. So we've got 3-4 years jump on those guys. And for them to start buying in R&D, they're buying products. And people don't buy products anymore, they buy companies. So we've got a bit of a jump on those guys. So tough markets and tough industries, and when it's not, it doesn't have the glitz and the glamour and potentially the huge earning capacity of the IT world, there's still so many other opportunities out there. And I think Thomas Edison's probably, I think he's a Sparky as well.
He probably was. That's probably why I picked it out. What's been the biggest success, I think, that you've had so far? What's been the biggest moment? When I say success, I don't mean money-wise, but what's the biggest moment where you kind of had a smile on your face that went right down to your belly, basically? What was that? Has there been a moment like that?
There has. There has been a lot of moments like that, but there's also been a lot in the other direction, which you probably remember.
I'll ask that next.
Remember more. Probably, we had. I always said when we started the business and we're looking to sell product, I always said once we reached $1 million of sales of our product, that would give me the comfort that the market's accepted it. From that point on, it's our bad. Anything that goes wrong from that point is not the product anymore. We can't blame it on the product. It's all about how we take it to market. So when we reached that first $1 million, that was a huge milestone. I think for me that was pretty. We've had a really big win lately. We've picked up I'm still not sure if I'm even allowed to say, but we've picked up a very big project.
A very big Adelaide project.
It's probably the biggest project in Adelaide for a very long time, and it's probably the biggest project of its type in Australia for a long time. So, and that's a huge coup for us when we're up against the Clipsals of the world. For us to be able to knock Clipsal off, that's pretty impressive, and for me. And I think we're sort of sitting at about 60% market share in the type of projects that we're looking at the moment. The problem is in the market, there's not that many of those projects. In a buoyant market, we'd be in a very good position. And at the moment, we're in a position where we need to keep fighting hard and make sure that we keep on in front of our competitors.
What happened when you walked into IKEA and saw your whole solution right across all of the...
Yeah, I still get a buzz from going to projects and seeing our solution there. It almost seems a bit surreal. But I'm probably a little bit different to most entrepreneurs or whatever you like to call it. And I think it's a really good point. A lot of people invested in a product. Nowadays, products don't sell. People don't. I'm not sure about the IT. That's not my sector. But I think that great ideas and great products don't necessarily. People don't invest in those anymore. As like the Clipsals don't buy a company buy a product or an idea. They buy a company who has a good product. So nowadays, I think, and that's probably something I learned very early in the piece, is you need to build a great business, not a great product. So I'm not so married to our product. Like if I love our product, but I love the business. I love seeing our product and I love seeing it there. But if that product had a different form or different shape or it was somebody else's product, I'd probably get the same buzz. I look at our product and I mean, it's my brainchild and we come up with it, but there's so many engineers along the way that help build it. It sort of doesn't feel like it. There's so many people involved, it doesn't feel like it's only mine anymore, which I think is great. I love that feeling. But I still get a buzz. I go to a job now and it's still a bit surreal, and especially like the job we just mentioned, it's going to be very surreal when it starts getting mentioned in that same phrase with that project. It's a huge flagship for us. It's
kind of like, isn't it, that the asset shift in the business. They started with the idea and probably not much of an asset, but you thought it was a huge asset at the time. Then it's moved to the product being the asset, and kind of now it's your customers.
Absolutely.
What's next for Wire by Click in terms of perhaps using those customers now as your asset? Is there new product on the horizon? Have you done your time? Is it not interesting anymore? Or is it still interesting? What do you think? I
think in the market, for us, we've got a great product, but that's just there's so many great ideas and great products out. That's a small piece of it. It's the business. Again, it comes back to the business. We've got a really good channel to market at the moment that not too many other people have cracked in the electrical industry. So there's a really big opportunity for us at the moment in an industry that's struggling, and our competitors are losing ground so quickly. I mean, there's some competitors out there that have had possibly some of the best brands in Australia, not just in the electrical industry, like the best brand in Australia. and their foothold on the industry has slipped in the last 5 years to a point where it's actually, for me, I find it sad. They're our biggest competitor, but I still find it sad that it's gone down that path. But so that, again, there's a huge opportunity for a company like us. We've got a different channel. We've got a lot of companies talking to us, wanting to do things for us. But we're in a critical stage of our business where the decisions we make over the next 12 months, this is our third year of sales, decisions we make over the next 12 months will sculpt this business moving forward. And I can honestly sit here and say that in 12 months' time, we'll be able to sit in the same position and I'll be able to tell you whether our business is very successful or potentially to the point where we get gobbled up by somebody else because it's just not sustainable. So I think that the decisions through the process don't change. So for us, it's exposing what we've already. We've got a great foundation. It's now exposing and leveraging on that great foundation in both the way we sell and selling potentially other products, and we've got another product range that we're looking to bring out shortly, and making sure we do that efficiently.
I mean, it's sort of an interesting concept, isn't it? That you can only make some decisions when you're in the moment.
Absolutely.
So in other words, when all things are bad, you can only make the decision that gets you out of the moment if you're in the moment. Almost studying it and trying to understand how you came about that decision. A key ingredient is that moment. So I guess your company's going through that moment almost now about what it does and how it expands. The moment though is different to when you're making all these mistakes. Do you think you'll make the right decisions in this moment?
Yeah, I do. I think I've matured a lot myself, but also the people around us. We've got a great team of people around us that can help make those decisions, and we're all more aware of the market. We're all more aware of the potential in the market. But I think I'll go back to what you say about making decisions in the moment. I find it, for me, it's always challenging when you watch an entrepreneur or somebody talking about the decisions they've made, and they look back and they talk about a decision they've made, and they say, I made this because of this, and it did this, 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 and this. But really, if you could rewind back in time to that point and you ask them, why did you make that decision? They would say, because I had to make a decision, and that's the one I made. Yeah. So again, it's that moment. You can glorify it when you look in hindsight, but it's just a series of decisions. You have to make the best decision at that time and make sure you've got the people around you to do it. And I think the biggest thing is making a realistic decision at that time.
Because a key concept that, again, we try and school our sort of startup companies that we're associated with is that certainty has high value.
Yep.
In other words, you can sit there and try and do the best thing or the most theoretically best thing, but if there's someone out there that'll do a deal with you or a certain deal, that's got value.
Yep.
Do you think that's a fair concept?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the key, and it just brings instant credibility to what you're doing, doesn't it? I think if you look at that deal in isolation, like sometimes, and we've had opportunities to do deals and we've done some good deals, you look at that deal in isolation, you're sometimes underwhelmed by what it represents, but what you don't think about is what the byproduct of that deal is, what the lead-on effect and what that can actually, especially if you've got ideas of grandeur that you're going to have a product that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars and somebody's going to come and buy you out or whatever. I'm not saying that was mine, but if you get to that point and then you get an underwhelming deal if somebody wants to, I'm not sure, co-brand something or whether they want to invest in $100,000 for a fair chunk of your company at some point, if that person brings a certain amount of smart money to your business, the byproduct of that can be astronomical. Looking at big projects, when we first started, we did a couple of big projects that didn't have a lot of margin in them, and we knew that, but we did them because we knew we needed some references. People want to feel comfortable about a solution. If we can reference some of these big jobs, the first one we won was the City Central Tower 8 here, the new ATO building. It wasn't great margin. It was a very tough project for us. It was the first big project we did. But as soon as we got that credibility and the project went seamlessly, internally, not so much. Externally, the customer, the client, which is inevitably the most important person, it was seamless for them and they loved it and they've used our product and nobody else has ever since. So, I think that's probably...
Because you talk about when you've got a pretty good group of shareholders too, right?
Great.
How do you almost come across to them when you've got a project, say that you're doing for certainty or for some sales or activity, but it may not have great margin? I've heard you describe those as strategic projects to those guys.
Yep.
To kind of go, well, this is a strategic project, even though, because your shareholders are going to always want to extract value from your business and try and say, well, why don't you charge more? You're a great solution, all those sorts of things. But you kind of use the word strategic projects. Does that work for you?
It does, but there needs to be a line as well. at the end of the day, if the business isn't profitable, it's not sustainable. So strategic projects have their place, and the industry at the moment, in a tough market, it's a great opportunity to gain as much market share as possible. And we're sort of going through that phase at the moment. So we're doing a lot of strategic projects, but the volume of the projects that we're doing warrants that. But I think the toughest thing, we've got a sensational group of shareholders, very understanding, very passionate about what we're doing, and we're very, very lucky because they've stood by us since day one. I think the best thing we ever did under, might have even been your advisement, I think, was put a board in place that almost sat between the shareholders and the day-to-day running of the business. And that was pivotal because when in the early days, we had 5 shareholders, private equity investors, all have successful businesses themselves and having a bit of a punt on something. In the early days, having to run decisions by those 5 guys with 5 different personalities, 5 different goals, 5 different experiences in business, it was very painful and a huge distraction. And probably for them, they were getting too involved. They really enjoyed getting involved, but they were getting too involved and muddying the waters a little bit. To have that separation of a board with 3 people, myself and 2 others that are very, one has a very successful business himself and growing quickly, the other pretty successful in his own right. But they in commercialisation, so they get the decisions, they make the decisions based with no emotion, they know the importance of them, and it cuts out so much distraction and so much, I guess, just managing personalities to a certain extent. So I think that's important. I think having people around you, again, I can't emphasise enough, is the most important thing and the biggest key to success, and making sure they've got the, not necessarily textbook smarts, but got the experience to be able to guide you as best they can. And you know what, the best people to have in a board are people that give you, it's not even really advice, they guide you, but they won't tell you what to do. They make you earn. The guys that we've got have made me earn my stripes again and again and again, and sent me away with ideas and some guidance, but never ever told me you have to do this or you have to do that. Which I think, initially I thought, wow, this is tough. I thought a board would give me more direction, but then as you get older and mature yourself, you realise exactly what they're doing. They're grooming you to be able to run the business and do a better job.
So do you think your shareholders invested in the business, or did they invest in you?
I would love to say they invested in the business, but they didn't. Nobody ever invests in the business because the business isn't worth anything. And still to the point today, really, without sounding arrogant or trying to talk myself up or anything, it's certainly not that. It's just realistically, the business still isn't worth anything without me, or not a lot, because I have the IP, I have the strategies moving forward. I'm the one that's sort of driven the ship so far, and there's going to be a point, and I think it will probably come in 12 to 18 months, where I'm no longer a key dependent person, and that's a good thing for the business. The business then becomes viable for other people and sustainable, a lot more sustainable. But at this point in time, and certainly early days, if I decided to leave, that business wouldn't have kept going. And as I said, at the moment, it's going to get to a tipping point where that's not a problem, and that's a great thing for business, but certainly early days.
And do you mind telling us how much you've kind of raised from the shareholders in terms of what sort of money they've invested in this so far, or what's been invested in this so far, I should say, apart from your blood, sweat and tears. But
yeah. So in early days, I reckon personally we invested about 120 grand, me and Bethany, my wife, to get this started. And realistically, if I look back now, that 120 grand probably didn't buy us much because I didn't do everything the way I would do it now. If I had that 120 grand now, I could certainly do a lot more. But we also got to a point where we had to make a decision, and I think it's an important thing for anybody that's going down this path to look at, is we had to decide, do we bet it all on black, or do we protect ourselves and our family unit a little bit and probably save my marriage in the long run? But do we do that and get other investors in and dilute our shares? So I only own 20% of the company now, and there's 6 other shareholders, 7 me included, and the total investment in the business has been around about $1.9 million. Yeah.
It's not insignificant to raise that sort of money in Adelaide, for example, from people around the place.
Certainly not.
It's a big effort.
And I think it's over a 5-year period. And we've got a lot of tooling and manufacturing in Singapore and all those sort of things. So and it's amazing how quickly your money gets eaten up.
So it's still a pretty lean business, right?
Yep.
I mean, if someone went and visited Why Buy Click today, what are they going to see?
They're going to see 3 sales guys in our office. We again, 12 months ago, we made a decision and saw where the market was going and invested a lot in systems. So we've probably invested somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 in a solution, an ERP solution, which allows us to run our business very lean. We've outsourced all our admin to a third party, all our bookkeeping to a third party, payroll, everything to a third party. So essentially everyone in our office, all they do is sales. And we do national sales, all out of Adelaide. So there's guys jumping on planes and things. But again, the industry's changed. It's changing with the industry, and that's why we've had success in that channel where nobody else has. Gone are the days in the electrical industry and construction where I think people wanted guys to come out and see them all the time. Everyone's time poor, not just that industry, all industries. So making sure that your contact or your touch with people nowadays is efficient and has an outcome is so important. They don't want you to rock up and buy them a pie and an iced coffee or pat them on the back because they just don't have time. They want to do what they've got to do and get home to their family. So we have systems now, and we're currently going through a process of implementing a portal where they can actually log on in their time. Because one of the things we've found is we work from 8 till 5:30. They want to get in at 6 before they start and look up where all the delivery's at and where our product's at and where it's coming in. And to give them that flexibility is great for them, and it's a huge reward. And actually, the byproduct of it is good for us because it makes us more lean. They're not ringing up and taking up our sales guys' time to answer questions and find things out from them. They actually log onto a portal and can see for themselves in their own time and when they need it. So it's a win-win for us.
Has business changed?
Certainly has. Business has changed in the last 5 years, hence the big players in the market are losing ground. It's changed in the last 10 years, and it's going to change an awful lot in the next 2. So I think, again, making sure you've got the right people around you, because if you have somebody in the industry that was successful 10 years ago, that same person might not be successful in the industry today because it has changed so much.
Because you picked almost the hardest industry to change. The electrical industry hasn't changed for God knows how long. The terminations and the so are they changing?
They're being forced to change because everybody's having to go leaner. The world's becoming a much flatter place, as everyone knows, from a purchasing perspective, but there's no margin. I've seen an article in the Adelaide newspaper saying that, in the Advertiser, saying that most builders are making 2%. Wow. So you can imagine that gets passed down the line. We're in the electrical area, so everybody's running extremely lean, mean businesses. The successful people are, and the people that aren't are going broke, which is happening every other day.
I'm going to ask you 5 questions to finish off,
okay? So
we can learn a bit more about you. What word do you use more than any other?
I'm not sure I can say it. No, I don't know. I really don't know. Personally or in the work environment?
You don't use entrepreneur. Why don't you use entrepreneur?
I don't like that. I don't like I'm not big on titles. For me, if you call, and no disrespect to anybody else, if you call yourself an entrepreneur, for me, if I called myself an entrepreneur, you've played footy, you know what footy. I think I relate it to the guy that's wearing the coloured boots. If you can't play the game and you're wearing coloured boots, it's going to be embarrassing. And I'm not sure that I'm at the stage where I can call myself an entrepreneur yet. I think once this business is successful and we might sell it, or we're returning huge dividends to our shareholders, then I'll call myself an entrepreneur or maybe even a CEO. But for me personally, it doesn't fit well. Other people, everyone's different, but for me personally, it doesn't sit well with me.
How would you describe your job to a 5-year-old? You probably have had to.
I've got a 4.5-year-old.
There you go. What do you tell him you do?
He says that I can do anything, which is always, it's a beautiful thing to hear. But he thinks I'm an electrician. And realistically I am. I'm still, and a lot of our success is probably based on the fact that I come from the industry and understand the industry. But I think we're just commercialising a product. I'm not sure what you'd call my official title is a managing director, because that's what I am. But I think what I do day to day is just commercialising a product. I think it's...
So your 5-year-old thinks you're an electrician?
Yeah.
Dad's off to wire homes today?
Yeah. Why by click homes, he calls it.
You probably are.
Yeah.
At your funeral, what would you most like to overhear someone say that?
They're definitely not going to say I was a good footballer. I reckon...
You don't want them to remember the time you dropped your pants?
No,
no,
that wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be good. There's probably a few skeletons in the closet there. But I think probably the main thing is, again, when you look at commercialisation and commercialising a product, or an entrepreneur, what you call it, it's very easy to lose that work-life balance. So for me, at my funeral, if they say I'm a great dad and a great husband, I think I've probably achieved what I wanted to achieve. I would rather that than them say, you know what, he made $100 million.
Excellent. Will you perhaps join me in thanking Mark for what I think was a great session?